Hi everyone, it's Paula. Welcome back to Trapani's Tech Tips for Teachers, where my goal is to help make teachers' lives a little easier. We made it. Well, just about anyway. We managed to trudge our way through the most challenging school year any of us has likely faced, complete with global pandemic, school closure, distance learning, on the fly technology training, myriad tech glitches, confused students, even more confused parents. The list goes on. So, if you're like me, you not only feel proud of all that you've learned and accomplished, but you are more than ready to put your Google Classroom to bed. This video right here is a collection of valuable tips that I've gathered from some of my favorite ed tech bloggers to help you wrap up your Google Classrooms for the year. There are several things that we have to consider and do. Here they are. They are listed in some kind of order, so I'll do my best to demonstrate and or explain each one as they come up. Okay, so to get started with this end of year Google Classroom cleanup, one of the first things you can do is really pretty logical. It's just to make sure that all the work associated with any given class is complete. And so I'm just going to go into one of my classes here that I'm a teacher of. And I had posted a video a while back. I'm sure you've come across this tip in your travels, but if you click on the three lines in the upper left corner of any given class, one of your options is to do. And this simply provides a to do list of all the things left to review or grade or return to your students. So, since some of the things later in this list uh, that will come up, as far as wrapping up your year, involve, archiving your class or making a copy of your class and sort of, making things unavailable down the line, before you do that, you want to make sure that everything was handed back to the kids. There's no, stone left unturned, so to speak. So just take a look at this to-do list and it will share, things that are, outstanding, work that's in progress, work that needs to be handed back. I'm trying to find a new category here. Of course, I have a long list. Things that are not graded or, things like that. So take a look at your to-do list. The other thing you can do is to unenroll students. Of course, you have to wait until the school year or the academic year is officially over. But a lot of teachers do this because even though you might be making a copy of this class or archiving it and using it in subsequent years, the assumption is that your current students from the 2019-2020 school year won't have access, but there are glitches there. And, to prevent cheating and sharing information and things like that, some teachers are very diligent about removing the people in there who are currently enrolled. So that is a pretty simple process. You're going to go into your class and click the People tab and check the box at the top right underneath the word students here to select all of the students. And then next to actions, you are going to click the little arrow and select remove. I'm not going to do it yet because my class is still in session. But once you've selected everyone, you can simply click remove, and that will, leave your class, but will unenroll all of those kids collectively. The next step in this wrapping up the year process is really just to sit down and process this whole crazy year, or at least the last third of it. Um, it may mean, actually making a list. If you're, a digital person, maybe you want to have, a spreadsheet or a Google Doc of things on your list of keepers and, things to toss away. Uh, Ironically, I'm a pretty techie person, but I'm a pen and paper gal. So I literally compile lists all the time. And, we were thrust into this distance learning process and we learned, a trillion things at breakneck speed every minute. We probably had to readjust the way we were doing things mid practice. So really, this was the time to sit down and look at, all of our approaches. What did we do this year that worked? What didn't work? What were our favorite assignments? What were some live or recorded lessons that we'd like to reuse or maybe edit? Maybe now we realize certain things should have been changed about those recordings. What resources did we share or should we have shared? Things like that. So I think the this list is going to become helpful, because as we move forward, what we're looking at are things like, files in our Google Drive, looking at the actual assignments in our Google Classroom itself. And we'll already have that list floating around at the tip of our minds to know what we want to keep, what we want to amend, all of that. So I think reflecting is key. Okay, so the next thing you're probably going to want to take a look at will be your Google Drive, specifically all of the documents and folders that now exist in your Google Drive, especially if Google Classroom was sort of new to you during this distance learning period due to the pandemic. You might have used Google Drive before, created a few Google Docs or Google slide presentations here and there, but now you're finding probably that your drive is overflowing, right? All the work that was shared with you by students, documents that were shared with you by colleagues, things like that. So you might want to, take a look and sort of organize. One thing to point out is as you go through, I have created many folders. I'm a folder person. But as you scroll through, you will find a folder that was titled for you. It was auto generated and it gets auto populated. The title of that folder is Classroom. You didn't create that folder, Google did it for you once you started to create Google Classes inside Google Classroom. All of the docs and things associated with those classes automatically get added to this folder. Do not delete the Classroom folder. Do not. It was auto generated and it's really difficult to get back if you delete it. However, if you double click that folder, you'll see folders for each class that you are a teacher of, or a member of, I should say. And inside that class are, additional files. So if you wanted to, if you knew that you are no longer teaching a particular class, you're not on the schedule to teach that next year, maybe that's a folder inside the Classroom folder that you'd like to move out of there. It's for some people this just bothers them. Having so many folders and so many files inside that one, umbrella folder called Classroom is just irritating to them. And if you're one of those people, you certainly can simply drag and drop and move these around. One suggestion that I came across while I was, researching best practice for cleanup at the end of the year was, maybe you would like to create a new folder. You can click the plus sign right over here for new and select folder. And maybe you want to title that folder with the current school year. Maybe you want to call it 2019-2020. And if you see something, a folder in here that you're not going to have a use for, or you just sort of want to store it away so that you know precisely where to find it, maybe you want to add it there. Maybe you want to call this new folder old lessons or last year's lessons or archived stuff, something along those lines that you could just kind of drag an entire folder or an individual doc. It's just a matter of dragging and dropping. But remember, Google gives us unlimited storage. So unless it's something that is really bothering you and overwhelming you because the list is too long, I would avoid deleting. You never know what you might want to go back to. Again, I think relocating these folders into a subfolder that you're not going to look at very often, kind of out of sight, out of mind thing, would probably be most helpful. So definitely take a look at your Google Docs and, sort through and see which ones, are valuable to you that you want to have, available for next year and maybe label them appropriately. The next thing you want to take a look at is your calendar because if you're not already familiar, so when you go into the Google Calendar, off to the left is a category, I believe when you first go in, you see the current month. And below that is a subheading called My Calendars. And you see, in my case, very few of them are checked off. The reason for that is the default is to make every class that you become a member of in any capacity, teacher or student, and all of the events associated with that particular class will show up on your calendar. And so if you start adding all of these things, your calendar can get overloaded. Mine is not too bad. I think it's probably because it's the end of the year and there aren't as many events associated with each class. However, when we first started this back in March, I realized I would go to my calendar to try to find, what time was that meeting? And I would see all of these blocks and bubbles and overlapping each other, and I couldn't understand, heads or tails of the whole thing. And I realized that once I started deselecting classes from the side, my calendar became much more manageable. So definitely take a look at that. You want to, only have, the current classes appear on your calendar. And you can also remind your students of the same thing, because even though you may choose to, archive your class for your period 5, seventh grade math, um, the kids who were in that class may still see this on their calendar, and you want, to remind everybody to, you know only make visible the current classes that they're enrolled in. So the next thing to sort of take a peek at is your calendar, and if you no longer want to see classes from the current year on your calendar, then go ahead and deselect those. Okay, so the next piece of preparing your class for end of year was new to me. I had only heard prior to doing a little bit of research here about archiving a class, and that might be a feature that you were familiar with already as well. And it will be the last thing that I talk about in these end of year tips. But this one, I think I like it a little better. I like the idea of having a template that you can reuse, and it's really simple to accomplish. And what it does for you is it copies a class that you have and names it as a template. What will copy over are the title of the class, and if you chose to fill in the section description, the course subject, things like that. Most often, I always kind of instructed my teachers, leave that blank if unless you really need to, because if you do choose to copy the class or reuse the class, it's less to edit later. But it will also copy for you topics. And that is especially useful because many of us, now that, this year we got really involved in using Google Classroom, and we really, dug in there and tried to organize our posts and assignments, and we grouped things by topic, and we started to do things, to make our lives a little bit simpler and less overwhelming to look at. um, those topics will also transfer. So you don't have to waste time recreating those, if you're using this class again. The other things that will copy are classwork posts and assignments or questions that you may have posted. Um, as actual tasks for students to complete, and they will be saved as drafts with no due date. So they're completely editable and changeable for the new school year. So I thought that was, really the main reason why I liked this using class template better than even archive. A few things won't copy. So things that you posted on the stream, like announcements, anything that you posted as classwork but then deleted while you were, in the midst of your class, the actual students will not copy over, and that is helpful and sort of eliminates a step that I previously talked about where you can unenroll all of the members of your class. You would only need to do that if you were archiving a class. If you're creating a copy, the students won't travel. Co-teachers will not travel either, and any posts that were made by students won't travel because the kids themselves did not travel to the new copied class. And the last thing that won't copy would be any attachment that you had posted that maybe you don't have permission to copy. For example, a document or an image that was shared with you by someone else, and you chose to, post it, but it's not really yours. You don't have permission, to copy it or make changes to it. It may not travel with you to the copy of your new class. But for these reasons, I think choosing the class template option could be really, really beneficial and a huge time saver. As you know, I'm all about making teachers' lives a little bit easier. So, when we're starting to recreate things for next year, having a template, I think will serve that purpose. Okay, so now let's see how easy it is to make a copy. I'm in my Google Classroom. I'm looking at all my class tiles, and I'm going to choose the class that I'd like to make a copy of. And next to the title of that class are those three dots. And I'm going to click that and choose copy. Very simple. So when I click that, it automatically comes up with a title for me, copy of, and the name of the class. And all I need to do is click copy. Once I do that, it's going to kind of do its thing. And depending on how, populated, I guess, your class is, it could take a little bit. So you're going to get an email notification when the class has been fully copied. And once it is finished, then you can have, oh, there it is. That was a quick one. That my practice class has not a lot of information in it. So the copy is there. And from there, then you can, of course, revise this to, meet your needs. So you'll see right here, it is, whoops, a little bit grayed out. Oh, it must still be processing. Um, there we go. So now when we see the three dots, we can edit that and I can change the name. I think what I'll do, I haven't done this yet, but my suggestion is going to be if I really wanted to hold on to this as a template, I'm not going to add students to this class. I'm going to keep this as a template for the future. I'm going to change the name instead of copy of, I'm going to call it, Trapani Practice GC template. So I will do that. I would leave section, subject, room blank because until you make the final class, I wouldn't add that information. That's just going to have to be changed each time you reuse it. So that would be the one change that I would make. Once I do that, then I can go in. There we go. Practice GC template. I would probably make that a little smaller because I don't like that I can't see the word template right here in this view. But once I have that, I would use that as the official template. So I would go in and make any changes. So if I edit this class, maybe I want to, um, add some materials, add some classwork. Right now, none of my announcements traveled over, just like we said. None of my students transferred over, just like we said. It's right now, it's blank, but that's fine. I'm going to be using this as a template. So let's see what classwork looks like. And what we'll see, yep, my thing's all saved. I had an assignment that was in draft form already, but it's everything is in draft form. So I had categories called tech tips and assignments. They traveled over. You see the icon is a little bit grayed out and often italics here is draft. So this has not been published anywhere. It wouldn't matter because I don't have students in the class anyway. No one's going to see my work in progress until I add students. But I'm going to leave this one simply as a template. Now, when I'm ready, if I wanted to use this, I might go in and change. Oh, remember that iPad thing? Oh, you know what? I have to make some edits to that. Edit anything that needs editing. And then I'll go in back to my tiles of classes. And when I'm all ready, I've made changes, I've, adjusted, deleted an assignment that didn't work very well and all that kind of stuff. I'm simply going to do that again. Click the three dots and choose copy again. Why? Because I want to keep this as a template to use every single year or every single quarter or every single semester, right? I'm not going to mess with this one anymore. This one's pretty much as I want it. Now I'm going to make a copy that I can actually use for future classes. And for those, you'll go in and edit, put your class period, put announcements, use the stream, add your students, things like that. So I thought this make a copy option was fabulous because it allows you to keep everything intact and only edit what you need. So that to me is a really, really useful suggestion that I found. And finally, the last Google Classroom cleanup tip is to archive any Google classes that you would like to have hidden from this view right here. When you open Google Classroom, you see every class tile of every class that you're a member of. You can archive the ones that you no longer will be using, and they won't appear in this view anymore. I don't recommend doing that unless you have done all of the other tips that I've mentioned. So, for example, I just made a copy of this class. So, if in fact I was truly finished, this year is over, this semester is over, I'm not using this class anymore, I don't want my students to have access to it. Um, I'm going to go through the list of reminders that I shared in this video, and the final step would be to get this out of the my class tile view here. And again, I'm going to go to the three dots, and this time instead of clicking copy, I'm going to click archive, and that will sort of hide it. It doesn't actually delete it. Um, you don't, I don't recommend deleting it because you can always reuse the posts. So I don't think that's, a great option. By the way, you can delete classes, but you must archive them first. Once they're archived, then they can be deleted if you choose. Um, so anyway, this is the three dots to archive. A couple things to note about an archived class. No more work can be submitted, so it's a great way to officially close it out. No more late assignments can be submitted. Like I said, it keeps it sort of hidden. So teachers or co-teachers and obviously the students won't be able to see it anymore. You would find it once you do archive it, it can be restored. So you can find it under archived classes that would appear here. I don't have any at the moment. It's just showing what I'm teaching. But if I had archived classes, they'd be listed here as well. And then you can click the three dots and choose more and then restore. The materials that were associated with the class are not gone. Remember, the assignments and documents that are connected to a Google Class are not saved inside Google Classroom. They're saved in your Google Drive in a folder called Classroom. So all of those materials are accessible. You can also reuse the posts, as I mentioned. So even though your class has been archived, you can create a new class or a copy of a class or from a template or whatever it is that you're doing. And when you go to add a new assignment, you have the option of choosing an assignment that already exists, and you can choose from any of your classes, current or archived. So I thought that was a really good feature. I just quickly wanted to demonstrate how to reuse a post and a couple of things to note about that process. So let's say, for example, I'm in the my practice class. Let's just choose that one. This could be any class. It could be one that you just created a copy of from a template, or a brand new class that you just started in the new year. And you would go through and make all your changes to your banner and all the things that you would like to change about it. When it's time to start posting assignments, you know that you have an assignment from some other class that you did last year and you would like to add that. Don't reinvent the wheel. That is insanity. So where Google gives us this brilliant option where we can click create, just like we've been doing all year, and most of us were using assignment or quiz or question or maybe even material, and maybe reuse because maybe you have already gotten in the habit of doing that. If you have, then it's the same exact process. When you click reuse post, so the first thing to choose is which class you'd like to use a post from, reuse a post from, I should say. So let's say I'd like to reuse a post from this class, LR Library, and now I see all of my things that I had posted. In this case, some were assignments and they look like the little clipboard, and some were materials. I can choose to reuse any of those. But if I choose an assignment, it could be any one of these things. You're going to click the assignment and choose reuse. And down at the bottom, my view is a little bit blocked off here because of my Screencastify notification. There is a box. It's right behind this little X here. Let's see if I can hide that. Okay, good. So now we can see part of it. Can I move this? Nice. Let's get this out of the way. Okay, good. So down here, I've selected an assignment. Whoops. I'd like to use this one. And I do not want to create new copies of all attachments. It's unnecessary. You're just going to clog up your Google Drive. There's no reason to do that. So try to remember to deselect that. And then you can click your assignment and choose reuse, right? So this, even though it may have attachments, I'm not creating new copies. I'm using the same one, right? Let's not have 50 million versions of the same document. So we're going to hit reuse. So reusing a post is just that simple. Really, each of these steps that I shared in this video are pretty simple. And I know it can seem, like a lot and just one more thing to think of. We're all basically in summer vacation mode at this point, and we've had an extraordinarily trying year. But we've worked really hard and we've gotten to be somewhat expert in all of these features of Google Classroom. And it's probably going to be something that we either have to continue using going forward due to what's going on in the world, or something we might choose to use on our own because we found that it really did make life easier in a lot of ways. So, just a reminder, when you are closing out your Google Classrooms, you really want to stop and think about, is everything done? What can I, maybe amend for next year? You really take a look at the folders and the calendar. You might want to consider setting up a class template. If this is something you're going to be doing in the future, why reinvent the wheel? Have things, kind of at the ready to make that startup process even easier for September. And certainly archiving classes, was a pretty simple process too. But you just have to remember, to take a look at the other things, above archive classes on this list, before you actually hide it. I would be remiss if I did not say thank you. I had received a few questions about wrapping up the year from my colleagues, and I didn't know all the answers. The only thing I knew to do was that you can archive a class. And I thought, oh, it's super simple. I don't even need to make a video for that. But when I Googled around, I have a few go to websites and blogs that I inspect first when I have a question, and I'll share them with you now. Support.google.com is, a lifesaver. Sometimes I find that there are a lot of details and it can be a little bit overwhelming, especially if you're new to Google Classroom or whatever Google feature you are looking up, because they really break it down, into all of these tiny, tiny pieces for each topic. And sometimes that can be a bit overwhelming. So I do like to look at that myself, but then I like to simplify it for others because, sometimes it's just a little too overwhelming to look at. But my three favorite blogs that I keep up with regularly are Alice Keeler, another one called Control Alt Achieve, and another one called Shake Up Learning. And what I did for this end of year Google Classroom wrap up was I looked at all four of these places and I consolidated the key points that each person made and, shared them all in one place. So hopefully, you'll pick and choose what works for you. And of course, reach out to me if you have any questions or concerns as you're working. Thanks so much for watching. If you found today's tip useful, like, comment, or share. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel so you don't miss a thing. If you have any questions, comments, or requests, you know where to find me.